Hi, my name is Tiffany Wright, and this is an episode of Lawyering Behind the Scenes on Lease Agreements. So, leases. Most people will enter into them at some point in their lives. You like an apartment, you have them do the credit check, and you're like, yeah, I got it. You sign the lease. Read your lease before you sign it. So, the lease is typically not going to be negotiable, but you definitely should read it before you sign it, and okay, if you don't want to read it before you sign it, you don't have time, you're in a hurry, please read it after you sign it, because there's just so many terms in there that you're agreeing to as a condition of you remaining in your apartment, house, whatever. And if you don't know those conditions, or if you have to move out suddenly, or it could just be a mess. So it's really good to know the terms of your lease, how it pertains to animals being in your apartment, if you have pets, how it pertains to smoking. I know that's a big issue at my apartment. Get you in some trouble because people will complain, and then if you don't know the terms of your lease, then you cannot respond. I won't say fight, but you can't respond to those complaints. So I'm going to go through some terms of the lease and explain them a little bit, and how that they can come up when you're trying to terminate your lease or moving out, or if you're having issues with a neighbor, stuff like that. So the first thing usually has the term of the lease. So like when it starts, when it ends. So when you're signing up for a lease, when it's usually going to be like a year-long lease, and then there are 6 month leases. But pay attention to the term, obviously, because you want to know like when you can move out if you need to, and also it usually dictates how much notice you have to give if you want to move out. And then there's month-to-month leases. Like if your term ends, like say I have a year lease and then that's over, then they might just convert it to month-to-month depending on how your apartment or house works. Occupants, they'll usually have a list of the occupants, so don't lie on that, because if they find out that someone is living there that shouldn't be living there, or they restrict it to a certain amount of people, then you can be found within breach of your lease, and that's just an unnecessary problem. So don't lie about how many people are living there. So rent, I would pay attention to see how much you're paying for rent, what the rent includes. Does it include water? Does it include trash? Does it include electricity? Does it include, like, you need to know what it includes, because if not, you're going to be paying extra for that. And if you're paying extra for that, you should definitely get a range from before you sign the lease of how much that's going to cost you each month and how they calculate that. Like for instance, in my building, they calculate that by they just take like how much it costs for that month, and then they divide it by all the tenants, and then depending on how many people you have in your apartment and the square footage of your apartment, that's how they determine how much you pay. So don't think it's actually a fair way of determining how much you pay, but every apartment building is different. So hopefully yours is not like mine, because I don't think it's cool how they calculate that. Anyway, and then you want to know how much they can increase it each year. So you might live in a city where there's rent control, hopefully, but a lot of cities don't have rent control, so the landlord really can increase at will. But it's good to know that either like look in your lease to see how much they can increase it by, so at least you have that knowledge. And if they try to increase it by an amount that's not mandated in the lease, or there's rent control and they're trying to increase it, or they're trying to kick you out, then you know your rights under the lease. Next is your security deposit. So security deposits are kind of a way for landlords to make money sometimes. So they usually have you pay more if you have like a dog or something like that. But the thing to pay attention with the security deposit, like when you pay it up front, there's nothing you can really do about it. It works how it works. But when you're leaving, make sure you get your security deposit back. And if they're deducting an amount from your security deposit based on things that they say are wrong with the apartment when you're terminating your lease, then you need those documented. So always do a walkthrough with the the landlord or the property manager, just so then later they're not coming up with things that they should have seen at the beginning. So you really want to keep an eye on that. And you're entitled to your security deposit like within a short time frame. It depends on where you live, so I don't want to give like you're entitled to your security deposit within blank days, because California is different from other states in terms of that. But make sure you get your security deposit back. Like, be organized when you're leaving an apartment or a house, because you're entitled to that and you paid it up front, and that's something that you should get back. Sometimes they'll use it like, use it towards your last month of rent. I don't recommend doing that. It's better to just pay whatever you owe and then have them give you the security deposit, just so you can have it be clean. So they're not saying like, oh, we deducted rent and then we deducted this and then we deducted that. Like, no. Just deduct the damage to the apartment that was identified during my walkthrough, and that's it. Okay? So also pay attention to what rights you have to terminate the lease and what rights the landlord has to terminate the lease. So the timing of the notice might be different. The reasons for termination are definitely going to be different. So just pay attention to that. There might be a termination fee that they're asking you to pay. So typically the termination fee that they would ask you to pay if you terminate your lease early would be liquidated damages, that it would be a set price. So liquidated damages are when the amount of the harm cannot be can be already, like, let's put a number on it ahead of time, basically. A little bit more complicated than that, but we'll just say let's put a number on that ahead of time so we don't have to argue about that back and forth. So they're saying, if you terminate your lease, I'm in a 12-month lease and I terminate it at month 6, these are the damages that the landlord is going to incur when they need to try to, give that apartment to someone else. Another thing that came up recently with one of my friends is that they decided to break their lease, and then they were finding someone to sublet it, which is never a good idea. Like, don't. They wouldn't give me all the details, so okay, I guess I wouldn't really call them a friend, an acquaintance. But don't do that. Don't. Subletting is never, ever, ever a good idea, really. It's never a good idea. Even if it's allowed under the terms of your lease, you're usually going to remain liable in some capacity, or it's just a messy situation. So if you need to terminate your lease, let the landlord find someone else. Do not find, somebody on Craigslist like this person was doing, or you just don't know and you don't want to be on the hook. You want a clean break. Like, I'm terminating, I'm out. I'm going to pay what I got to pay, or I'm not going to pay what I got to pay, but I'm not going to help you find someone else who could be a big problem, and then you're trying to come after me. So don't sublet. Don't sublet. That's kind of all I have to say about that. I hope you got the point. Like, don't sublet. You really want to pay attention to the rules and regulations of your complex or the house. So like, smoking is usually a big thing. They don't want cigarette, marijuana, whatever smoking, because it gets into the walls, and other people can be complaining, then people have allergies. So no, they're never, like, I don't know any building in today's day and age that allows that. Kind of like a hard thing to dispute with your landlord. So at least know the terms of your lease before you start arguing about it. Other rules, there will be like, we have like quiet hours, so you can't make noise during certain hours, mailroom rules, stuff like that. So just pay attention to the rules of your apartment, maybe, or your complex or your house or whatever. Even if you don't plan on following them or you don't agree with them, it's good to know them, because then, the landlord knows the terms of the lease. So the leasing agents, the property managers, all the people who work in the building, they know the terms of the lease. They know what's not allowed and what's allowed. So put yourself in a position to know that, so then if anything ever comes up, you're not scrambling to try to figure out, how do I dispute this? How do I confront this? What do I say? You know the terms of your lease. It doesn't take you that long to go through it. You don't have to know it like from the back of your hand. You don't need to get into the legal terms if you don't understand them. Leases are really like plain English written, so you should be able to understand most of it, comply with the rules or not comply, and know where you stand in that situation. Well, another thing is allowing access to your apartment if there's an issue. So the landlord can come into your apartment if there is an issue, like an emergency. Otherwise, they need to give you notice if they're going to enter your apartment. And then if they're coming in your apartment to resolve something that you've asked them to resolve or an ongoing issue, it's a good practice. Like if you're having an issue with pests or hot water or something that's related to your standard of living and what we call like inhabitability, if it's related to your like basic comfort in your apartment, you should document every time that someone's coming in there to adjust it. You should document every time you're reaching out to the landlord to address it. A lot of apartment buildings, like my apartment building has like a whole a system. So like anything I say, like I need a service order, it's all tracked in this system. So I would document that separately too. Like if you're actually having like a really big issue, document it outside the system, but you can also like kind of use that as another mechanism if you weren't tracking it before, to go back in there and look to see when you made these requests. Because if you need to terminate your lease due to this, or you want to get out of your lease, it's good to have that record of what happened, because that is really going to be the foundation of your basis for terminating your lease early or leaving immediately. So if you have an issue like that is the landlord has made has made various attempts to correct and it still hasn't been corrected, or the landlord has not made attempts to correct after multiple complaints, and it relates to like hot water, heat, depending on where you live, plumbing, stuff like that, then you have a right to terminate your lease. This is California too, so please look at your state law, but in most states you have the right to terminate immediately for that cause. But it has to be like repeated attempts to contact them, repeated attempts for them to fix it without resolution. And just be careful with that. There's a lot of resources online for tenants. I would not use, like if you're having an issue and you need to terminate your lease, I would definitely research it online. Google is your best friend. And you don't need to always like get a lawyer for tenant landlord situations. You can if it's a big issue or they're, you know, accusing you like of burning down the building or something like that. Yeah, then it's time to get a lawyer. But if it's a smaller issue, look online for resources and look particularly in your state, in your county, for resources. There's a lot of tenants' rights, nonprofits, organizations that can give you resources, even give you letter templates, call templates. There's also, like I used to work or volunteer at a tenants' rights hotline. So you can call on the hotline and we used to just counsel tenants through these issues, like what's going on, what their rights are, what they say to the landlord, and you know, they just write it down, you follow up with them, and it's for free. So a lawyer is kind of like you're in deep trouble, or you know, you're having a bigger issue. So I wouldn't spend money on a lawyer unless you're having a big issue, but that's just my personal opinion. The other thing is get renter's insurance for sure. Like get renter's insurance, even if your apartment building does not require it as part of the terms of your lease. Get it, because you do not want to be liable for whatever goes wrong. And if you get your stuff stolen, at least you can recoup some of the money that you lost. I think that's about it. So I hope you learned a lot on this episode of Lawyering Behind the Scenes about your lease agreements. I tried to do this one because it's like more practical and how you can apply in your everyday life. And I'll also be doing one on like how to get out of DUI and stuff like that, and some more practical ones that you can use in your everyday life. Knowledge is power. So read your lease. That's like the saying of this thing. Like I hope you got that point. Read your lease. Read your lease. Anyway, I'm Tiffany Wright. This is Learning Behind the Scenes. I'll see you next time.